Recording started. There you go.
Awesome. Thank you, Elena. That's good news too. So everybody will get the recording as well as all of the gifts. And most of you know me. Many of you know me very well. And here's a graphic bio of my experiences at leading transformations around the world. You might know that I've spent almost 6 months a year for all the years before COVID in Australia because the Australian Prime Minister had the vision of becoming the world's most agile country. So I spent time with all the corporations and government heads in Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore. Um, Also helped lead the Walmart transformation, and these other names you might recognize as well. Possibly everyone knows Disney, and one of my favorite quotes is, "It's kind of fun to do the impossible." And I might encourage you to think about tonight and think about as we're heading into 2024, especially if you're going to plan on attending our open space. That's a great opportunity to develop a strong network of support, and it's a job finding network as well. So I encourage you to possibly find your own sentence or find your own word that you'd like to hear people saying about you. And my career has been marked by taking on the impossible. The more impossible a situation is, the more it draws my energy and my attention. I wanted to make a comment about Walt as well that he didn't mention yet, but Walt had been the hypermaster of the Hyperloop system back when innovation was being funded and energy was flowing in the areas of deep innovation. And so he's got a lot of stories to share as well. Most of the companies that Walt and I started working together at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, that's forensics and criminal intelligence, as well as the state of Colorado. And we both spent our careers at Disney and have retired as permanent cast members of Disney as well. So he's got a lot of stories to share with you tonight as well. Especially if my voice gives out, I'll be counting on Walt. So does it resonate with everyone that we're all heading in to an incredibly uncertain future? We will never know exactly what's ahead of us. And that's what there are elements in this talk tonight about. But we don't need to know, because when we're really good at stepping into the edge of the unknown and over it, then we will transform those unknown unknowns into new knowledge and gain the confidence to actually stay ahead of the curve in terms of creating our bold future. Walt and I run our own company, iHorizon Inc., which stands for Innovative Horizons. And one thing I'd like to encourage you all to think about as we're just getting started today, if there was one thing that you could walk away from the next hour or the time that we have together tonight, what might that be? If there was one thing that could really make the most important difference in accelerating your journey to an amazing future, regardless of how uncertain the world becomes, what might that be? The topic we're talking about tonight is neuroagility. Our brain is our greatest asset, and we sometimes don't recognize that because it can actually work against us. Interestingly enough, and I'll sprinkle in a lot of neuroscience material tonight as it's relevant, is our brain craves certainty. So it is not always our friend. It sometimes limits our vision and possibilities, but neuroagility is our greatest asset. And rather than read these slides, I'll just kind of do a lightning talk through them because I know you can read a whole lot faster than I can talk, and that'll preserve my voice to get me through the rest of the evening. Benefits. If we're looking for that secret sauce as we're heading into 2024 to create that real competitive edge, not only for ourselves, but for our teams, neuroagility creates higher engagement across the board, deeper learning, and faster learning, faster recall, and creating a positive mood through visual storytelling. I hope many of you have had the experience of valuing the storytelling process. And we've had the good fortune of working with some masterful storytellers at not only Disney, but at Pixar as well. And all of our career, we've understood the power of telling a story, the story around a campfire that really draws people in, because our mind expands when we hear a story. We gravitate towards that storytelling because it helps us connect new learnings to existing knowledge, and it makes it fun. Prompting recall is also a good way to remember. Learning itself takes a lot of energy, and storytelling is a very powerful way for us to enhance that. So I'll spend a little time talking about surprises about our brain, but I do want to encourage you, anyone who I'll encourage Walt to look at the chat as well and interrupt me if a topic comes up. But if anyone wants to take yourself off mute and jump right in, I love the opportunity to keep this highly interactive. So who's got any topic they want to make sure we cover tonight? And I've got on the slides right now some neuroagility fun facts that might surprise you.
Hi, Pat. This is Kamal. I was wondering if you can cover, how will artificial intelligence change the way we lead?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you might be surprised by my answer. When a long time ago, Kamal, I was the AI expert at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, designing forensics labs and being the AI expert way before anybody ever knew what AI was. And AI is, in terms of our brains, AI doesn't stand a chance of dominating it. We can use the benefits of AI, but there's so much fear around people thinking AI is going to displace their jobs, that AI actually is going to create opportunities for them to enhance their outlook in using their intelligence more effectively, and by automating a lot of the routine tasks that they can get off of their plate so they can actually grow into that full potential of using their neuroagility. Does that make sense? People are sometimes unnecessarily fearful about AI. I also think quantum and quantum intelligence is probably more important. I spend more of my time watching what's happening in the quantum world than in the artificial intelligence world, because it's a tool. It's a tool for us, if that helps. But did that answer your question, Kamal?
Yes, Pat. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a great question. And one of the things that might help enhance that with the neuroagility fun fact is all of us can only pay attention to any particular topic for 20 minutes or less at a time. And if we don't actually take action on that topic within the 24 hours after we've learned it or started to practice it, we will lose it. Because our brains are hardwired to shed anything that the mind doesn't discover is really important. So it's the old use it or lose it. And we need to reflect on it. And the tip that I want to offer all of you is when we're thinking about learning a topic, the most important focus area is what action do I need to take to anchor that learning into my memory so that I can retrieve it exactly when I need it most. And many of you might have heard about learning agility. Around the world, learning agility is the #1 skill that executives are recruiting for. And that is our ability to learn real time when an event happens, how to learn from that event. And I'm going to make sure I cover more learning agility material that I will gift to you as books on that um, in the backup material that I'll be following up with as well. So learning agility is something you probably want to spend some time on. Neuroagility, learning agility, and understand not only how our brain works, but how our team members' brains work. Because interestingly enough, every single person's perceives things in a different way. So a question I might ask back of you, all of you, is do we create our own reality or do we see reality as it is? Are there any thoughts or ideas on that?
I think we create our own reality.
Absolutely, we do. And every one of ours is different. And sometimes it's not entirely close to the real reality. So it's really important. The technique that I would encourage us to take not only adaptive actions for how we're going to learn from an experience that's happening to us, but what action are we going to take? And how are we going to put ourselves in situations? The riskier the situation we put ourselves in a safe to fail environment is going to enhance our ability to learn real time much faster and become much more aware of what reality really is. So one of the things we do as Agilists, as Agile leaders, is we learn how to design thin slice experiments. So by a thin slice experiment, I don't mean an experiment that takes 2.5 months or a new product discovery lab that takes even longer. But we try to design the thinnest possible slice experiment to transform the unknown unknowns into new knowledge as fast as humanly possible. And then with that thin slice experiment, we either pivot or persist. If we write the hypothesis out and we discover that the running of the thin slice experiment validates our hypothesis, then we persist and expand it to a thicker and a thicker slice, broadening it to our deeper customer base. But if it turns out that our hypothesis was not validated, we need to pivot very quickly so that we don't create our own reality and change our own awareness without actually transforming or learning new knowledge. So you might have noticed a lot of what I was just talking about. The heart of our ability is to enhance our learning agility and learn real time as quickly as possible to ensure that we're creating an accurate awareness of reality. So awareness is key and action is key. Those two pieces kind of fit like a glove. Awareness, taking action, awareness and action into this kind of infinite loop. And you'll see some material at the end of the deck tonight that you'll be getting as well. Other questions? Has anyone find yourself struggling with uncertainty? Having a real hard time with it? There is a book that you're going to get as a follow-up from this session from David Snowden, the master of sense making. And it's a brilliant book that is very, very valuable on Cynefin model and how to manage complexity. When we learn how to manage uncertainty and transform complexity into certainty, then we are truly gifted by being able to learn faster than anyone else, which is why it's the skill that's most highly sought after in the world today for recruiting not only high performers, but executives as well. So let's do another check-in to say, is this resonating with you? Does this make sense to you? Do you believe it to be true? One of the things that you can do is a takeaway from
Yep.
Oh, thank you. Please contribute. I'm sorry I interrupted you. One of the things I invite you to do is to test and validate all of your assumptions through experiential data. Empirical data or evidence is our friend. Perfection is the enemy because we're always trying to get it right. But it's much more important to be good enough for now rather than be right at everything. Companies who've fallen into the trap of everybody believing I'm right and everyone else is wrong is truly struggling with that trap. And a great case study on that is Microsoft, who Satya Nadella, one of the visionary leaders, CEO of Microsoft, learned that firsthand. And we can go into a deeper case study on that, but let me invite you for more questions to keep this highly interactive.
Actually, I want to go back to your previous slide where you talked about uncertainty, right? So how does one embrace uncertainty in like our day-to-day, and even when you're planning in the long-term horizon?
Yes. This might sound a little strange, Kamal, but it's very true. Uncertainty, the way our mind works is uncertainty can be our friend or our foe. Our brain is naturally fearful of uncertainty. So we are hardwired, each one of us in different degrees is hardwired to fear uncertainty. Our brain likes to fill in the gaps, and our brain wants to be right. It's more important for our brain to feel as if they're in control than it is for them to embrace uncertainty. And so the Cynefin books, there's 2 Cynefin books that you'll be getting as a result of our session tonight. The Cynefin books are masterful tools at being able to diagnose not only the sense-making of uncertainty, but discover that the world of complexity is where we learn the most once we've diagnosed it. And one way to do that using the Cynefin model is to embrace chaos. And many of you who know me well know that I love embracing chaos. I get really jazzed about being at the edge of an impossible problem to solve and say, bring it on, because I know I cannot fail. So this is a very long-winded answer to your question, Kamal, but when you embrace chaos, you cannot fail, because we as adult human beings, we learn more from our failures than we do from being right or our successes. In other words, when our hypothesis fails, we transform the unknown unknowns into new knowledge. So when we really wrap our head around that and understand that to be true, we know we cannot fail. Because if we're learning fast enough and we're courageous enough to actually step into the unknowns, we're unbeatable. Now, I have a really good quote in here. I can't remember how many slides it's down, so I might zoom into it pretty quickly. But it's a great quote from Eckhart Tolle. Many of you know the thought leader Eckhart Tolle. I'm going to buzz through some of these slides so you can browse through. There's a constant storm of electrical activity in our brain, and being always on drops our IQ, and focus occurs through inhibition of distractions, which take energy. Learning takes energy as well. I like this slide because it says change is about pain, focus is power, and most importantly, our expectations create our own reality. Kind of going back to that earlier question. But there's two quotes here that are relevant. One is Arthur Schopenhauer, and this is a reality test. Every one of us takes the limits of our own field of vision to be the reality of the limits of the real world. And so this is an important test tube learning to say, what are we going to do about it? What action are we going to take this new knowledge and start to behave in a different way? So give some thought to some ideas that you might think you want to take away from this session and possibly bring into the open space that will be running the first of the year. Flow and peak performance requires just the right level of stress, and it occurs when you have two neurotransmitters. It's that complex to build your own reality. It's surprisingly easy to get stuck to a small set of solutions, but it's important to allow your brain to idle and have some space to imagine. Many of you who know me well know I like to use the word imagine. So everyone who's ever taken a shower has an amazing ideas coming out of the shower. Has anyone had that experience? It's when you're taking a shower that a problem that you hadn't been able to solve at all becomes instantly solvable when you're not even thinking about it, because you're idling. You're giving your brain that space to imagine, which is absolutely critical. And I'm heading my way down to the reality that all of us are drowning in uncertainty. And I'm heading my way to the other slide that has Eckhart Tolle's brilliant idea. And this one I want to give you time to think about as I leave it up there for you to read and think about it. If uncertainty is unacceptable for you personally, it turns into fear. If you are very comfortable with uncertainty and you find it very acceptable because you realize it's the way of the world today, it turns into increased aliveness, alertness, and creativity. So hopefully you'll use these slides to remember what you want to bring forward to your 2024 and to create the future that you want to. If you know this to be true, And most of us believe Eckhart Tolle. He's a highly respected person. And you might ask yourself, if you know this to be true, what might you do differently starting tomorrow? Any thoughts or ideas from anyone?
I think that when we grow up, we have these fears that are, when our brain is developing, the fears are developing within that. And I know that last week, or not last week, a couple of weeks ago, Volker, we had Volker, I'm so sorry. We had a conversation about, mind you, I don't know if you remember me, I'm the substitute in third degree. So we were talking about what happens at home we bring to work as well. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
if we haven't solved the things that brought about the fear, even though we may know this to be true, like we were talking about earlier, we're highly illogical and we'll still act within our own limits. So maybe in the workplace, my only suggestion, this is what I had thought of when we, as we've been going through this, is support any type. If there's some sort of support when somebody is scared, when we are fearful of the uncertainty, if support exists within the team. And mind you, I've never worked on a team. I've never done project management. I'm dipping my toes into this for the first time. So this is all very, very new, but I'm bringing my own experience to this. And I'm thinking, if there's like someone on the team that can go, hey, it's okay. I don't like, almost like a professional project management therapist that can go, hey, it's all right.
Exactly. You've got great insights. So one of the things that you've nailed and you've gifted to the entire group is the fact that safety, feeling safe to fail, feeling that you can stretch out of your comfort zone and step into that uncertainty, it's highly likely you're not going to get it right the first time, isn't it?
Exactly.
Exactly. So you've got to design some support structure. And several of the things I'd encourage us to take away from this session is learning circles. So with my clients all over the world, I usually create a learning circle for anyone who wants to stay connected and create a strong support structure with members of the other learners in the group. Excuse me. That they form a learning circle or a study buddy to help each other learn. I've made a note for you to give to everybody else on this call is PMI's PMBOK. PMI has wildly embraced agility. So has the BA.
Pat, get some water.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, Pat, you need to take a break. Walt comes in over here.
You can take it easy, Patty.
Take
Uncertainty for sure is something we have to deal with. We've always had to deal with it forever. And most companies try to eliminate it. They try to eliminate it by locking down requirements, trying to locking down where their products are going to go, locking down their customers, and refusing to change. So it hurts you in more ways than one. You have to allow uncertainty in order to succeed, because you're going to find out things that you had absolutely no idea were going on out there if you try to block uncertainty. And this is why waterfall is such a failure, because they absolutely try to stop uncertainty. Okay, next slide.
Walt, if I can jump in here for a second on the topic of uncertainty. Jay earlier chimed in with Jamal around AI and that sense of uncertainty of like, wow, there's this powerful tool just on the horizon. and how that might affect how teams, like the degree of autonomy, how much trust can be extended, including some of the fear that, at least at the moment, it's still fabricating a bunch of stuff. And these hallucinations. Maybe, Jay, if you want to elaborate a little bit more and build on that.
You have to iterate on it. I don't think you can rely on AI to eliminate uncertainty. Chances are it's going to make it worse because you're going to get a lot of different responses depending on how you approach the AI tool. So tools aren't the way out. The way out is people. And it said constant communication and constant collaboration and then constant seeking for the truth and for knowledge. And I remember on Hyperloop, we had absolutely no idea how to build Hyperloop. So what we always did was we'd always split off groups to try to go and do research and try to find out what the options were for each particular technical issue. And then we tried to come back and try to integrate the answers those guys came up with a larger group. So that happens a lot. It's happening a lot in the U.S. Space Force, which I think is probably more agile than anybody in the military. So they're trying to learn what the enemy is doing, learn everyone in the space community in the United States, which is something they have never done. They've always been Air Force specific. Now they're going out to everybody and trying to gain knowledge. So what you do is you gain knowledge, you try to inspect, you try to adapt, you try to integrate. And then you throw a lot of things out and you have to move really fast because these guys can't be slow anymore. The Air Force is slow. They've been slow for decades. That's what they're for. I mean, they're slow. But the Space Force was part of the Air Force and they've completely changed their attitude, which is amazing. So how are we doing, guys? We can't get rid of uncertainty. Matter of fact, we want uncertainty.
Yes.
We demand uncertainty. If we don't have uncertainty, something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great topic.
Better we learn.
Yeah, I'd rather be uncertain and learn and work your way through it than not. So that's the way we were in Waterfall. We just made a decision, put it in stone, then 18 months later, we find out it's all wrong. So we have to be able to change as we go along. So here we go, collaboration. So collaboration, the Air Force Space Force is trying to set up their entire organization to promote connections and collaboration, which is something the Air Force never did, ever. I was top-down command and control. Well, you're going to do what we say you do. But now they made a really concerted effort to push decision-making down the command chain. Those guys who are close to the action are making the decisions. And the guys who are above them, who used to have all the power, their role is to support the people at the lower level who are making decisions, who are on the ground, close to the enemy. So this is really different from what has been happening in the military. Now, the Army doesn't get it yet. The Navy doesn't get it. The Marines get it. Mm-hmm. So it's not like everybody has gone this way. Space Force is very different, very different. I love them. We have a chance.
I have a quick follow-up, and thanks for introducing me also with the question. But it's interesting you mentioned the Marines too, because yeah, like the structure of their leadership is like very like handoff if like something happens. So that's kind of interesting that they have a very agile leadership force. But I noticed that you guys were talking about the kind of dichotomy between tools and people. However, I kind of wanted to follow up with that because for instance, email or cellular communications or even Zoom, those are tools. But without those, like, do you think that AI, like the nature of our work would be very different, in the professional world without emails, say that, we'd be making phone calls all the time. There'd be a very limited bandwidth to communicate information. But the advent of a tool, I still think that it does change the way people will behave because it has an affordance that's latent to it. And with generative AI, I think it's, by definition, it does generate, but the output is actually in some ways rather predictable as well, depending on how it's approached. There are techniques and stuff. So ideally, say 5 years from now, there's a more refined, mature system. I was kind of wondering, like, how would like the average employee, say in a company, like how would that impact their day to day? Would it kind of empower them, or would it be a big detractor for maybe say management or leadership? Like, would it kind of kind of make things fall apart, or would it help unify them, given that everyone has access to the same tool?
Yeah, I don't see how they can. Everybody just runs out and starts doing queries and getting answers back and different answers. They're going to have to come up with some kind of management structure that allows these ideas. Just like we come back in Hyperloop with all these weird answers from everywhere, we have to vet those answers to see that they make sense. So all that stuff has to be vetted. Now, the great thing about AI is there's a ton of information. You can get a lot of stuff, and you can vet a lot of stuff. And a lot of stuff is bad. Some of the stuff is good. And you have to figure out which one fits with you. I don't think the Air Force is even using it right now, the Space Force. They probably will have to, to keep a step ahead of the Chinese. But there's a lot of stuff they're doing that you can't find. It's classified. You can't find it out there.
But one thing we'll add is the missions for NASA. We'll make sure you get that material as well. Is that they've done a tremendous amount of investment in themes around how to run a future-focused organization. And I've made a note to make sure we follow up with you on that as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, the other thing that comes to my mind on AI was the big threat everybody's scared of is they'll automate the battlefield. And there's no human interaction. And AI takes over and makes all the moves, and everything is automated, and everything is a robot, and it just fights it the way it sees it, and it's kind of a nightmare.
That's a fear. It's not realistic.
We've automated the battlefield quite a bit. We just haven't put machines in control. There's a human interface that's doing it. We have automated everything, but we don't make automated decision making. We have automated detection.
And quite honestly, our brains are far more powerful than automation. So here are some ideas that we might be able to benefit from how to improve our own neuroagility. Learn something new. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Meditate. Walt, do you want to share anything about your Space Force article for the Business Agility Institute Emergence Journal? We can make sure we.
Yeah, that's how I know Space Force, because I did a write-up on them. I saw this was happening. Space Force is new. It's was set up in 2019. And it used to be like a little division of the Air Force. It didn't have much. And what they did was they put the global positioning satellites under Space Force. They put the space plane under the Air Force. They put all these communication satellites and a lot of the telescopes under the Air Force, but they know it's not enough. They know they have to speed up their cycle because China is a major threat. They're innovating really fast, and we have to beat them to the punch. So that's exactly what they're doing. And they realize if they use the Air Force methods that take decades to develop anything, it won't do. They got to do things in weeks and months. They got to get things into orbit. So they're going to militarize space, and they're doing that right now. And other countries have done it. They have hunter-killer satellites up there, and the United States is launching its own through the Space Force. So we're going to see lots of changes. It's completely different way to look at it. And the Marines are similar because they're small and they're light and they have to move fast and they don't have these giant capital projects. They kind of sponge off the other services to do it. And they allow their lieutenants and captains to call the shots out there. And we saw that, I really love it because when I hear these captains out there, like in Iraq, they're calling the shots and they're going to say, okay, I'm going in here. And then they report back to position, and the guys back in command have to figure out if they can support them or what's going to threaten them. Those guys had some guts to go out there and make that call. Heroes is what they were. So the Space Force is going to help them because we're going to have a lot of look down capability for all of our services, and they're going to have to integrate with everybody, which means the Navy doesn't need these big satellites in outer space anymore, except for global positioning, which is now part of the Space Force. So, yeah, they're incredible. And I can't believe the generals that are running Space Force. I can't believe their attitude. These guys are Air Force lifers. And they came out of a system that was so command and control and so top down and so heavy. And they completely flipped. It's stunning. And they're not doing it because they're doing it because it's agile. They don't even know what agile is. They're doing it because the enemy is doing it, and they have to keep up. So,
and they have to learn.
Yeah, they have to learn a lot faster, and they push learning. They're really good at training and learning, and they push that way down the chain of command. So guys are learning really fast, and they're learning all the time. They're really good.
Walt's done some great research on the topic, and we'll make sure you get a copy of his publication on it and the benefit from that with Emergence, the Business Agility Institute's journal. Yeah. We'll make sure you get that.
I'm a Navy veteran. I served during Vietnam, and so I think in Navy terms. But these guys in the Air Force, in the Space Force, are way improved over what the Navy was doing before. So the Navy should watch them closely and start building ships a lot faster.
Other questions? We've got about 20 minutes left, so I want to make sure we're covering what's important to you.
Actually, I have one more question around productivity.
Uh-huh.
In terms of how to measure productivity, especially in this, era where we are in, where less is more is like the front and center of everything, right? And we also want to avoid the typical metrics that people measure around output metrics, right? So
yes,
how do we exactly? How do we reframe that thinking, and how should we measure productivity, especially from an engineering organization standpoint?
Great. It's a great question, Kamal. And I wrote a journal article on that called Value Fusion. And I'll make sure you get a copy of that. That was also from the Emergence Journal, very much like Walt was talking about Space Force. So in a nutshell, we've got to focus on show me the value and the benefits that we created in a measurable way, not output, but actually the cost of value. And value fusion is the new goal. It's a future goal. So value fusion is what we should be focusing on. And that's where a lot of organizations have not evolved in their organizational adoption of Agile. They get stuck on the process, and they focus on getting something out the door every 2 weeks, but they're not showing about the optimal flow of value to the most important customer, because you need capacity to learn and optimize the flow of value. Does that make sense to everyone? So I've got a great value fusion article that will help nail this, because I've addressed the whole topic in value fusion, and I kind of call it star power in our pocket. In fact, tonight I'm wearing my star. I've been able to purchase a star from space, and to have the fusion of a star in your pocket is the equivalent of having this magic wand, if you will, of being able to generate more value at less cost. We all get trapped by being too busy being busy. We have to actually create the space to think and reflect and learn with value fusion.
So Pat, that's a great topic, and most organizations struggle with that, right?
Yes.
Try to take time and to think through, and how do you optimize the workflow to our end customers?
Yes.
Because most of the organizations struggle with that. and because they're so highly dynamic and they need to deliver quickly and don't give the time or the space for their teams and departments to really think through how do we do the optimization workflow of
Yes,
values.
you're
That,
absolutely right. And I think probably everyone on this call has experienced that. We over-engineer it, which is the trap number one. We over-engineer the solution to be more is better, not less is best. Well, we actually have to simplify it. And that's why I have some very intensive value models. I'll make sure I share with you as well. Most of the work I do with executives is about quantifying value based on how do we measure the real benefit to the business, to the company, to the team, to the customer. If we're not disciplined enough to measure the benefits that we're delivering and the cost of value, so I come up with a value index and I've written an emergent white paper on that, which I'll make sure you get as well. Because it's the highly sought after, it is the secret sauce. The cost of value and optimizing the flow of value. It takes time to get it right. And you have to adapt continuously.
yeah.
Has everybody noticed we're too busy being busy? We're trying to do too much.
Unfortunately, a lot of the organization I've seen, like you said, they stop and they give up
Yes,
and they start and they don't quantify the value. They just try to do quantity versus quality. They just
exactly.
go back to that rhythm,
Exactly. And
unfortunately.
they over-engineer it.
Yeah.
But it requires a new discipline thinking about show me the value and the cost of value. I've done some deep work on this topic with Jim Highsmith, the man who originally came up with the word, the agility. He was one of the original manifesto signers. Jim's passionate about this topic. So I'll make sure I send you all the material. I'll follow up with all the material that we have on the value engineering white papers and workshops.
Hey Pat, I have a question. It's related to that, and that's great to have the information, especially like when you're working with finance, they're asking for forecasting for the year. Like if we
Yes,
can quantify the value, it's really hard to get the funding
yes.
approved for the entire year.
It's
So
it's it's ineffective because you can't quantify the value uh, until you've actually got the benefits realization case built. So it's the cart before the horse, if you will. The white paper that I wrote with Emergent covers exactly how to do that. So, and I have a workshop on value engineering that I'll be happy to share with you on how you could actually turn that around. It does require disciplined thinking, but not over engineering it. The trap people fall into is false level of precision. You've got to be able to think the secret sauce here is relative value, not is this pen worth 10 times this pen, but it's relative value. So the secret sauce behind value is benefits realization and relative value.
Yeah, let me step in here, Pat, for a second.
Please, Walt.
Talk about value. It's very interesting. If people don't do it very well, some people are getting started with it. What happens if you don't try to formulate a value proposition for any of these things? Well, you're going to miss it. We've been doing that forever.
Guaranteed you'll miss it.
We're going to miss it. We're going to miss it badly. So here's what we do. We're trying to learn what's valuable. At number one on the hit parade, we're going to go out there. We don't know what's valuable or isn't. We want to find out what's valuable or isn't. We're going to keep trying it until we come up with something that makes sense. So let's keep grinding our way at a value proposition and validate our assumptions, which are probably way off. And there are assumptions out there that on the business side that are way off as well. So we have to flush all that stuff out and reduce our risk of failure. And that saves a lot of money, because if we can figure out what's valuable, oh, by the way, that value is going to change.
It is the secret
It's slippery
sauce.
as hell. So you have to keep on top of it all the time. That's what bites people. That's in the waterfall world. We always thought we knew it was valuable. We locked it down, and 18 months later, we found out we weren't even close.
Yeah.
We weren't even close 18 months in the past. So, yeah, Elon Musk does it, even though he's crazy. He tests rockets and he blows them up. It doesn't bother him. He just blows a rocket up, and then he learns something. Goes back, makes some really fast changes, gets that next rocket out there, launches it, blows it up again. So he's testing his assumptions, and eventually he's going to get to a point where, hey, this dang thing works.
And he's using real empirical data to learn.
He'll
Did the rocket fail or not?
He'll spend the money to fail.
But he can't spend the money. That's the difference, right?
He can blow it, man. He does. He blows it.
But I think that's why it's sometimes I see a lot of challenge versus infra project versus customer facing project. And then it's hard to actually articulate the value for the infra project. That can take long term to actually getting into the adoption and realizing the value versus the new customer feature. You can just pop in like in few sprints.
Yes.
It's horrible. You get really late in the process and then you find out you're wrong. Damn, especially if you're doing hardware. It's like, well,
it's all about
modularize everything, do it in modules. And Elon messes this up a lot. I mean, he doesn't do things in modules half the time, and his motors fail and his rockets spin out of control because he can't handle the fuel sloshing around, stuff like that. He blew up a launch pad not that long ago.
So there are other topics that you might follow up with that we're including for you, like the deepening your own awareness of what your strengths are with the Neuro Leadership Institute's SCARF assessment. That's a good one to take. The dilemma of feedback and the surprising thing about change, but drivers that most impact your brain performance will help you to learn and grow continuously. So I'll buzz through the rest of this while you're thinking of other questions you might want to make sure we cover tonight. Or just shout out your questions.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by these topics, Pat, and especially the topic of certainty versus uncertainty.
Yes.
When thinking about Agile, we try to guide the team to create some level of certainty, with their, what they can deliver, for example, with the how consistent you are and how predictable you are. So we try to get that level of certainty somewhere in there, built in, and we try to optimize that level of certainties. So the question is like, how do we optimize? Where do we find the balance between having the right enough of certainties built in versus the uncertainty that might exist somewhere in the system?
Great question. And remember, I referred earlier to an amazing book we're giving you on the Cynefin model?
Yeah.
The Cynefin is a sense-making tool that helps you identify whether the right solution set is complex. If it's complex, there are no solutions to the challenge. And the uncertainty is so high that you have to design thin slice experiments because it requires learning to even understand what kind of problem you're trying to solve. If you're dealing with a chaotic problem, the Cynefin model will help you pinpoint the fact that it is a chaotic problem, like a terrorist attack or some event that what you do in a case like that is you take rapid action so that you can take action to transform that uncertainty into new knowledge so that you can use it real time. You might notice a pattern here of everything we've covered tonight. If it's complicated, like COVID, or like the Center for Disease Control, or any outbreaks, then it's a complicated problem that requires expertise, and no level of chaos or design thinking and experimenting will handle a complicated problem. You have to fund the research, and you have to actually bring in the experts who've got that deep domain knowledge. But the interesting thing that I want to make sure you're aware of before we leave tonight is the biggest mistake we make is assume we're trying to solve a simple problem when we're really solving a complex problem. And then bad things happen. Because what do you think happens when we mistakenly diagnose a problem as complex? I mean, a real complex problem with no known solution. There's no knowable solution. We actually make it worse. And then we get trapped and entangled by that entrapment. We have to disentangle it by properly diagnosing it. So the tools that are available for you at your disposal is to sharpen your awareness and your diagnosing ability. And the books that we'll be sending you on the Cynefin model, some really good books to help you. There's a little Cynefin mini book, and there's a Cynefin book that David Snowden wrote. He is the master of the sense-making model out of Wales. We've got an amazing book for you there as well. Does that help?
So Pat,
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Great insight.
My pleasure.
So Pat, if I try to summarize
Yes.
the last 15, 20 minutes on this topic is like we need to design the experiments that will get us the fastest possible learning at the lowest possible cost.
Yes.
Okay.
And
I also think what you said, Pat, is very important because we need to figure out, is this a simple problem or is a complex problem?
Exactly. And that
yeah.
is such an important, empirical data is your friend. You cannot possibly know by instinct or intuitively. You've got to actually design thought experiments to validate your assumptions with empirical data. So in this domain that we're all heading into in 2024 and beyond, empirical data is our friend. Evidence-based learning is what I really reinforce for my clients and my executives. I do a lot of work in clean energy companies now all around the world. Empirical data is your friend. And the biggest mistake they're making, I'll share this with you as well before we leave tonight, because we're down to our last 6 minutes. They try to do too much. These very senior executives that are running clean energy initiatives and are accountable for them all over the world, they're already working incredibly long hours. They just keep carving stuff on top of it. They keep piling it on. They've got to actually stop doing a lot of the low value work. The value questions that you asked earlier were very powerful. You've got to stop doing marginal value work so you can create the space to use empirical data to transform real knowledge unknown from the unknown unknowns. You have to transform the unknown unknowns into new knowledge with empirical data through hypothesis testing and through science experiments, kind of like a science lab. That's why you might have seen some of my slides earlier had a little science theme to it with test tubes. But practicing peace of mind for change, one thing I'd like to highlight before we leave tonight, Gene Kim. Do you guys know Gene Kim, the DevOps guy? Have you heard of Gene Kim?
Yes.
He's written a brilliant new book, Wiring the Winning Organization. I'd highly recommend it, and I have an excerpt from it that I'll include with your follow-up material. He's designed 3 simple mechanisms to move from this danger zone that we're all in now, trying to do too much, to a winning zone by making problem solving easier, make the problem simple to solve, and make sure that the problems are seen and solved. So I'd strongly recommend you pick up a copy of this book for your own Christmas present to yourself. And I reviewed the book for Gene. He's a friend of mine, and it's a worthwhile book. Does that make sense? Every one of us takes the limits of our own field of vision to be the limits of the world. And instead, we've got to really understand that our journey to greatness is through empirical-based, evidence-based learning. That's the secret sauce.
Use AI.
Cool. A lot of, you can also take a NAP assessment, like the SCARF assessment. You can take a neuroagility profile to see how you're doing with your free brain agility check. Mental flexibility, learn from everyone and copy no one. That's my words of wisdom to you. As long as we keep learning from everyone, but don't try to copy what somebody else is doing without using that empirical data-based, evidence-based learning. Does this make sense to everyone? Down to our last 2 minutes.
Absolutely. This is great.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you like it. The number one personal barrier to the creation of future fit cultures is understanding that you need to learn from everyone and copy no one. One last tool. This was a little innovation lab that takes 2 minutes. I know we don't have time to do it tonight, but as the last slide in the deck, what I encourage all of my clients to do in a MindSpark innovation lab is to just carve out 2 minutes and start speed writing questions. So I surprise people, I disrupt them, I kind of encourage them to change their priority to generate as many questions as you can possibly generate in 2 minutes, and you will surprise yourself with how effectively you've used those 2 minutes to surface in from your subconscious things that you know to be important. So this is the last kind of takeaway from tonight's class.
Oh, this is Brad. Good to see you. It's been a while. Yeah, it brings up when you're talking about the subconscious. My sense is like you can use your intuition to get started, but then use evidence to validate that intuition.
Yes,
that's probably the best.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that's the last part of this deck, which is a takeaway for you, is a gift from Dr. Irena O'Brien from the Neuroscience School. And these are 10 neuroscience strategies that you can use and learn. So these will help you as well, and they're based on empirical data. So hopefully you find that useful.
Hey, Pat, were you thinking about sharing this slide deck with us or?
Oh, yes, right.
Oh.
In fact, this slide deck and a lot of other material I've already sent to Elena and Volker, but we'll be sending you the PPT of it so that you can use it. And it's our gift to you. Feel free to use it because there's really powerful links and assessments and note pages. And we're happy for you to use it because hopefully you picked up this theme tonight. The more we do this, the better we get at it. The more we learn, the better we get at learning. And the more we're good at cultivating empirical data, the better we get at being a scientist.
Thank
So
you,
you'll get all of this and stay in touch. I think you all know how to reach me.
Thank you, Pat. This is wonderful data. Wonderful.